I joked, "Want to move in with me?" Asterisk, I said it with a crooked smile, barely looking up from the box of tangled extension cords I was pretending to organize. Asterisk, she was standing in the doorway, arms folded, her presence filling the room. Like the scent of late summer rain, steady, quiet, lingering. Her gray eyes held mine for just a second too long before she replied, calm as a whisper. Asterisk, only if it's forever. Asterisk, the air didn't move. Neither did I. The joke had landed. Somewhere deeper than I'd meant, and her answer was so soft I almost asked her to repeat it. But I didn't. I just nodded, like I understood, like we both knew it wasn't really a joke anymore. Asterisk, that was the moment it changed. Asterisk, before her, my life was static. Not broken, not dramatic, just muted. I'd moved back to this weathered town after losing my job in Chicago. Not fired, just faded out. Another layoff, another shared shrug with strangers I never cared to know. I rented my uncle's crumbling house on the edge of town, the one with the peeling green door and rusted wind chimes that played a lonely, uneven song every time the wind passed through. There were days I didn't speak to anyone at all. I survived on gas station coffee, canned soup, and the idea that maybe something, or someone, would eventually surprise me. Asterisk, she was the surprise. Asterisk, it started with the neighbor's dog, hers. A scrappy mutt named Jasper that wandered into my garage while I was half-heartedly trying to build a shelf I'd never use. He was muddy, limping slightly, and came straight up to me like we were old friends. I knelt to check his paw when I heard her voice behind me. Asterisk, don't mind him. He thinks every open garage is an invitation. Asterisk, I turned. She was leaning on the frame of the garage door like she belonged there. Soft blue dress, bare arms, hair pulled back carelessly like she'd been tending a garden and forgot to care how beautiful she looked doing it. Late 30s, maybe. 40. Older than me, clearly, but not in a way that created distance. She had the kind of presence that made you feel like you'd already known her, maybe in another life. Maybe in every life. Asterisk, I don't mind, I said. He's got good timing. I needed the company. Asterisk, her smile was quiet, like a secret she hadn't decided to share. She crouched beside Jasper, fingers brushing his ear. Asterisk, Amara, she said. Asterisk, Daniel. Asterisk, we shook hands. And something about the way her fingers lingered told me this wasn't going to be one of those passing, neighborly exchanges. There was weight in the silence after. Asterisk, the next few days passed like soft echoes. I saw her on the porch, sipping coffee. I waved once. She nodded. Then the second time, I offered a small joke about the wind chimes. She laughed. Third time, I brought over a potted herb plant I'd picked up on a whim. Not sure if I meant it as a gift or an excuse to talk. Asterisk, you growing a garden? I asked, noticing the half-dug beds along her fence. Asterisk, trying to, she said. Something to keep my hands busy. Asterisk, there it was. The edge in her voice, that almost hidden weariness that said I've been through things I won't say out loud. Just yet. I didn't press. I just knelt beside the garden bed and asked where she wanted the time. Asterisk, that became the rhythm. Me finding small excuses to be near her, her never turning me away, but never quite inviting me in either. We talked about unimportant things, weather, old vinyl records, books we meant to read. But it was in the things we didn't say that the current lived. She had a way of pausing mid-sentence, like she was testing whether I was safe enough to hear the rest. I never pushed. I just stayed. That seemed to matter. Asterisk, one night it rained, thick and steady, soaking the cracked pavement and turning the dry grass lush again. I couldn't sleep, so I stepped outside onto the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and a mug of reheated coffee that tasted like burnt hope. She was already there, sitting in the dark with her knees pulled to her chest, her hair damp with mist. Asterisk, can't sleep? I asked. Asterisk, never can when it rains. Asterisk, I sat beside her without asking. The wood creaked beneath us. The porch light buzzed overhead but didn't flicker on. We didn't look at each other. We just listened to the rhythm of the rain. Asterisk, I think that's when I started to fall for her. Not with fireworks, not with fantasies, just with stillness. With knowing she was there, breathing quietly beside me in the night. That she'd chosen to share the silence. Asterisk, the next morning, she left a note in my mailbox. It said, asterisk, thanks for sitting with me last night. I didn't realize how much I missed being seen. Asterisk, no signature. just a pressed sprig of thyme taped to the bottom. Asterisk, I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. I just knocked on her door. The next day with a box of old bulbs I found in the shed and said, "Want to help me plant something stupid?" Asterisk, she smiled again. That secret, soul-deep smile. And said, "Only if it's going to live." Asterisk, there was something blooming. Between us, not fast, not loud, but real. And that night, while we were sorting tools in the garage and she joked about how bad I was at organizing anything, I tossed the words out with a grin and zero expectations. Asterisk, "Want to move in with me?" Asterisk, her eyes didn't flinch. Her voice was barely audible over the soft patter of rain on the roof. Asterisk, "Only if it's forever." And just like that, I couldn't pretend I didn't mean it. The days blurred into one another after that exchange, each one unfolding like a quiet promise, a soft rhythm that settled into the fabric of my life. Morning light spilled through the cracks in the porch wood, catching the dust in golden rays. And I'd find myself on the porch with coffee in hand, staring at the world just starting to wake up. Asterisk, she was often there before me, as though she had nothing else to do but wait for the day to start. Her garden was becoming something real, something beautiful, as if she were coaxing it into existence with more than just her hands. She had a way of moving, slow, deliberate, as though every action carried meaning. I couldn't say why, but it pulled me toward her, like gravity, pulling, but never forcing. Asterisk, we began to share those mornings, not with words, but with the quiet kind of presence that felt intimate in its own way. I'd bring coffee over to her porch, and she'd always be there, waiting, already with a mug in hand, the steam rising in the cool air. Asterisk, we didn't talk much. Not at first. She was busy with her garden, and I was still working on the house, fixing broken pipes, repainting the porch. I never said it aloud, but it felt like we were both just filling in the spaces, making up for something unspoken. As I worked, I'd feel her eyes on me, catching me off guard, and I'd glance over, meeting her gaze for just a second before we both looked away. Asterisk, there were times, in the late afternoons, when she'd bring me a glass of lemonade or iced tea, and we'd sit side by side on the porch steps, watching the world pass. I couldn't tell if it was a habit or a shared understanding, but I never questioned it. I never had to. Asterisk, her touch, when it came, was small. A brush of her fingers against mine when passing a tool, a hand resting lightly on my arm while pointing out a spot that needed attention in the garden. Those touches were always fleeting, never lingering, but they were there, small, quiet acknowledgments of something neither of us dared to name. Asterisk, I learned more about her in those moments. Not from what she said, but from what she didn't. She never spoke of her past directly, but there were glimpses, little cracks in the surface that I caught when I wasn't looking. She mentioned her ex-husband once, but it wasn't a story of bitterness. It was just a memory she allowed herself to remember, quietly, without judgment. A glimpse of a time that wasn't this. Asterisk, he left, she'd said one evening, eyes fixed on the garden. But not because we were unhappy. Sometimes, people just drift. It wasn't his fault, and it wasn't mine. We just grew apart. Asterisk, that was all she said. No more details, no anger. It wasn't the way people usually talked about lost love, but I understood the weight of it. I didn't press her for more. Asterisk, there was a longing in her eyes, though, a kind of restrained desire that I couldn't fully place. She had a way of looking at the world as if she'd seen too much of it, as if she'd already given so much and didn't have the energy left to ask for more. There were nights when she sat across from me at the table, fingers wrapped around her glass of wine, staring at the light from the fireplace, and I'd catch the distant look in her eyes. A kind of faraway sadness, like she was somewhere else, someplace private, not ready to return. Asterisk, but even in those moments, I couldn't feel the distance. I was right there beside her, close enough to share the space, the silence. Asterisk, one evening, while I was fixing the broken step in her backyard, I felt her watching me. I glanced up and found her standing by the garden, her hands folded in front of her, eyes soft but steady. She wasn't smiling, but her presence was enough to make me stop what I was doing, to stand still for a moment. Asterisk, you've been good to me, she said, and the words felt heavy, as though they carried more than they seemed. More than I ever expected. Asterisk, I didn't know how to answer, so I didn't. I just nodded, leaning against the rake, trying to steady my thoughts. But there was something in the way she said it, something vulnerable that made me wonder what she was really asking, what she was really offering. I stood there for a moment, taking in the way the late afternoon light wrapped around her, the way her hair moved softly in the breeze. She was always a little guarded, but I saw in her eyes a quiet, unspoken need, a need for something beyond the comfort of shared moments, something deeper, something more real. It wasn't until later that evening, when we were sitting together on the porch, that the space between us finally closed. We were both quiet, sipping our drinks as the sky darkened above us. The world felt still, as if the night was holding its breath. As I reached for my cup, my hand brushed against hers, just for a second, but it was enough. I felt the warmth of her skin, the soft pressure of her fingers. Neither of us pulled away, but neither of us made a move, either. There was a moment of stillness, a pause that lingered in the air between us, before she turned her hand over, her fingers pressing gently against mine. It was the first real touch, no longer accidental, but intentional, a quiet declaration that neither of us had to say aloud. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just held her hand, feeling the pulse of something warm, something that made the air feel heavier, richer with possibility. Her eyes met mine in the dark, and I knew, just in that brief moment, that we were both on the edge of something we hadn't been able to name yet. But it was there, right between us, fragile but real. And for the first time, it felt like we were finally allowing ourselves to be seen. The storm came without warning. 1 minute. The air was thick with stillness, the sky that strange, bruised color of late evening, just before something breaks. The next, the wind howled down the street like it was looking for something to tear apart. I heard the creak of branches, the low groan of old wood shifting under pressure, and then the rain, sudden, heavy, relentless. I was standing in my kitchen, the lights flickering, watching the sheets of water blur the world beyond. The window. Thunder rolled low and long. The porch light snapped off. That's when the knock came. Not a panicked knock. Just firm. Repeated. Like someone trying not to sound worried but failing just enough to betray it. I opened the door and found her there, drenched, barefoot, hair stuck to her skin, a flashlight in one hand, a towel clutched around her shoulders. Her garden had flooded, she said. The back fence had blown open. Jasper was barking like mad, afraid of the thunder. Her power was out. I didn't know where else to go, she said, quiet, breathless. You did, I replied, and stepped aside. She didn't speak much as I handed her a dry shirt and a pair of my sweatpants. She changed in the bathroom, left the door open just enough that I could hear the faint rustle of fabric, the creak of the mirror cabinet. When she emerged, her face was clean, hair tied back messily, and she looked more like herself than I'd ever seen her. I always hated storms, she murmured as I handed her a mug of tea. When I was married, I used to sit through them alone, even when he was right next to me. I looked at her over the rim of my cup. She sat cross-legged, on the couch, fingers wrapped tightly around the mug like she needed it to stay grounded. The room was dim, lit only by a few candles and the soft glow from my old desk lamp. He wasn't cruel. Just distracted. The kind of person who makes you feel like you're slowly vanishing. She glanced at me then, almost ashamed, as though she'd said too much. I didn't rush to fill the space. I just sat, letting the silence stretch out, not to smother her but to hold her, to say you can keep going if you want to, or not. I'll still be here. She did. I spent years being quiet, making myself smaller, telling myself that needing anything was weakness. When he left, I didn't cry. Not once. I just cleaned the house, fed the dog, and went on with it. I thought I was okay. She looked down into her tea like it might answer something for her, but I wasn't. I was just gone. No one even noticed. Not even me. She blinked hard, like she didn't want to cry in front of me. I reached out then, slow, cautious, and placed my hand gently over hers. You're not invisible, I said. She looked up, and the light caught the shimmer in her eyes. For a long moment, we didn't move. The thunder cracked again, and still we didn't move. Asterisk, then she shifted, just slightly, and leaned toward me. It wasn't a kiss at first. It was her forehead against mine, her breath mingling with mine, our eyes closed. That closeness, that stillness, it felt like the world holding its breath with us. When her lips did finally touch mine, it was soft, hesitant, earned, asterisk, not rushed, not claimed, just shared. Asterisk, I kissed her like she was something breakable, not because she was fragile, but because I knew what it meant to be touched after forgetting what it felt like to be wanted for nothing but who you are in the quietest parts of yourself. Asterisk, she pulled back only slightly, our hands still intertwined. Asterisk, I'm scared, she said. Asterisk, so am I answered. But not of you. Asterisk, she pressed her cheek against my chest and let out a breath that sounded like release. We sat like that for a long time, listening to the storm unravel itself outside. Asterisk, no promises. No declarations. Just the warmth of another person, close enough to feel real. Asterisk, eventually, she fell asleep against me. I didn't move. Asterisk, that night wasn't about falling in love. Asterisk, it was about being found. Asterisk, and in the soft hush that followed the thunder, we let ourselves be known. Not with words. Not even with touch. Asterisk, just with presence. Asterisk. Only if it's forever, she'd said. Asterisk, and every day after that, I lived like maybe she meant it. Asterisk, mornings settled into a kind of quiet magic. She'd be on the porch before I opened my eyes, always wrapped in that same faded robe, steam, curling from the mug in her hands. I stopped knocking. I stopped asking. I just showed up with 2 mugs instead of 1, and she always took the one I offered her without a word. Sometimes we spoke, about nothing, mostly, but other times, we just watched the sky change colors above the trees and let our silence say everything we needed. Asterisk, her garden thrived. The time we planted that first week had taken root and spread, curling between the stones like it had always belonged there. We added tomatoes, mint, lavender. She laughed more, the kind of laugh that started in the throat and stayed in the eyes long after the sound was gone. Asterisk, there was no dramatic turning point, no defining kiss that changed everything. What changed was the slow weaving of a life. The sound of her keys in the lock, the way she folded my shirts with the sleeves tucked just right, the soft shuffle of her bare feet across the hardwood at night. She was becoming part of the house. Part of me. Asterisk, but one night, the air shifted. Subtle, but enough for me to notice. We were sitting by the fireplace, Jasper curled up between us, and she was quieter than usual, distant in a way that felt familiar, like the version of her I'd met when she first arrived on my porch, full of shadows and half-held breath. Asterisk, you ever think this is too easy? She asked, not looking at me. Asterisk, easy. I repeated. Asterisk, this? She said, gesturing between us. The comfort, the silence, the way it fits. It scares me sometimes, how much I want it to last. That usually means it won't. Asterisk, I didn't answer right away. I watched the firelight flicker across her face, the way her thumb traced slow circles over the rim of her glass. The truth was, I'd been waiting for this moment. Not because I wanted it, but because I knew it was inevitable, the voice in her that said love doesn't last. That permanence is a trick of timing, not truth. Asterisk, you think I'll leave? I said. Asterisk, I think people get tired, she whispered. Especially of women like me. Complicated. A little older. A little too careful. I set down my drink and reached for her hand. I repainted the front door, I said softly. Asterisk, she blinked, caught off guard. What? Asterisk, this morning. Before you got back from the market. You probably didn't notice. She stared at me like she didn't understand. You told me once, I said, that you always dreamed of a house with a blue door. Not navy. Not teal. Cornflower. You were very specific. A small, breathless laugh escaped her lips. I found the paint, I said. Did it before the sun came up. My hands are still stained under the nails. She stared at me, searching for something in my face. I want this to last, I said. I'm not waiting for it to fall apart. I'm building it. Asterisk, her eyes filled before her lips could form words. She looked down at our joined hands, her thumb now still against mine. Asterisk, I don't need forever to be loud, I said. I just need it to be real. Asterisk, she leaned into me slowly, her forehead resting against my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her and felt her breath steady against my chest. Asterisk, I noticed the door, she murmured. I just didn't think it was for me. Asterisk, it's for us, I said. But it started with you. Asterisk, we stayed like that until the fire died down, and even after. The storm outside had passed, but a light snow had started to fall, dusting the world in soft white. The porch light, newly fixed, glowed warm behind the curtains. Asterisk, eventually, we moved to the porch, wrapped in one blanket, sitting on the same old bench we always did. 2 mugs steamed between our hands, the scent of cinnamon and clove rising. With each breath, the snowflakes fell slow and silent, catching in her hair and melting against our cheeks. Asterisk, I looked at her, really looked, and saw every version of her at once. The woman with the guarded eyes, the girl who once felt invisible, the person she was becoming again. And beside her, I saw a version of myself I hadn't recognized before. Grounded, steady, whole. Asterisk, she turned to me, eyes reflecting the falling white, and whispered, okay, just that. And I knew what she meant. Asterisk, she wasn't asking for a promise. She was accepting the one I'd already given. Asterisk, we didn't say another word. We just held hands, shared warmth, and let the snow fall quietly. Around us, the world soft, the door blue, and everything finally beginning.